Lord Varys is bitchy, mysterious, a master of whispers, and the not-so-subtle puppet master of the entirety of King's Landing, while also being a mermaid. But where does he come from? How did he get so involved in the plot? And how is he literally manipulating the entire series to somehow bend to his will? Let's explore, shall we? Now, to understand Varys and his puppet mastering abilities and how he's been able to do it for 20-ish years at this point under, like, 4 kings? Because remember, he started under Aerys, the Mad King, and, may have contributed to his paranoia, but we'll circle back to that. But where has he developed his, puppet mastery abilities? Well, that goes back to his unfortunate childhood in Lys. From what little we know, Varys was born a slave and then basically bought by a troupe of mummers. Mummers are the old-fashioned term for like an acting troupe. So they would go around doing plays, and he was bought and basically taught how to be an actor. From what we see in the series, he got pretty damn good, not only in his, acting ability, but in his ability to disguise himself very thoroughly. This is an element that kind of doesn't show up in the TV show, though I really wish it would have more, because Varys is known for being able to, like, fully disguise himself and, change his voice, change his physical appearance, with, like, wigs and all of this fun stuff, so that people straight up do not recognize him. There are several times where Tyrion, like, sees him, doesn't realize it's him, and Varys has to be like, yo, bro, it's me. It even happens with Ned in the book, more so than in the TV show. I just rewatched that scene, and, like, he's dressed up, but, like, it's not as convincing. Anyway, he's bought by a mummer's troupe, he's taught his craft, becomes very good at it, until one day his master is made a very big offer that he couldn't refuse. And that was when a sorcerer basically wanted to buy Varys to use him in some form of blood magic. Now, we know it was blood magic because it involved the snippy of Varys' business. His business was then thrown in the fire, and a voice came out speaking another language. Varys didn't know what the words were. Also, this was all happening while he was given a potion that made him, unable to move, but fully able to feel everything. It's a not so pleasant experience, obviously. But after the sorcerer is done with him, he throws him out in the street, and when Varys asks him, like, okay, what am I supposed to do? The sorcerer basically tells him, well, I suppose you can die. And this is when Varys decides, well, I'm going to spite him, and I'm going to make sure that I live. And so he starts a really unfortunate life as basically a street urchin. He becomes, like, a very talented thief. He engages in selling himself however he can, and eventually starts making a decent living. And he does this after he develops this kind of hustle with his friend Illyrio Mopatis. He's the really, really big guy who helps sell Dany to Khal Drogo in the first book, but he is Varys' friend. And they develop this hustle where basically Varys is such a good thief that he goes around stealing what thieves steal. So if a thief, stole something from a rich person, he would then go steal that from the thief and then give it to Illyrio, and Illyrio would sell it back to the person who was originally stolen from for, like, a small, like, finder's fee. Which, if you remember that later on in the series, Varys and Illyrio are trying to help put Aegon Targaryen on the throne. Rhaegar's supposedly lost but saved son who was smuggled out of King's Landing and now is being, like, brought back to be put on the throne. Sounds a little similar, maybe. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. So Varys and Illyrio, they get really good at this hustle of, like, stealing from the thieves, selling them back to the rich people, and then eventually they make quite the fortune and then begin dealing in weightier things, namely secrets. This is where Varys develops his penchant for, like, discovering information, because he realizes that it's the information that is more valuable than anything else. And then to help facilitate this, he buys, like, a bunch of, like, little slave children, which he nicknames his little mice. Hey, little birds. But in Pentos, they're his little mice, and he uses them to help facilitate this information that he is then, making tons of money off of. And he becomes so successful that when a certain paranoid king on the other side of the Narrow Sea, Aerys Targaryen, the Mad King, suddenly doesn't trust his son Rhaegar, his wife Rhaella, most of the lords and stuff, he has Varys basically brought over and offered a job. Varys obviously accepts, and then some unfortunate consequences start occurring. Because remember, at this point, the Mad King didn't start off like fully cuckoo bananas. He slowly got more and more paranoid as time went on, and Stannis, in one of the books, I don't remember which one, comments that Barristan Selmy, the head of the Kingsguard, mentioned that the rot in Aerys's court began when Varys arrived. Because it was Varys who was filling his head with all this paranoia and feeding it when the other lords are like trying to like calm him down, be like, no, everyone isn't against you. You need to chill, dude. But Varys is like, no. Everyone's a thief. Everyone's a sneak. Let me tell you, here's all the information. And this, made Aerys go more and more crazy. Eventually, though, towards the end of Robert's Rebellion, when Tywin is at the city gates, it's very interesting. I just did a video last week about Pycelle, who convinced Aerys to open the gates to Tywin to let him in, but it was actually Varys who argued against it, said, do not let them in, they're going to kill you. But Aerys, at this point, is just fully cuckoo, so he's believing who he wants to believe, and at this moment, he believes Pycelle because Tywin's his friend and wouldn't do that, even though he originally brought Varys on because he didn't trust Tywin anymore, but whatever. This, of course, leads to Robert winning the war because Tywin sacks the city, Jaime kills Aerys, yada, yada, yada. But now, what is Varys doing in the present day? Well, it appears that he is trying, and has been trying, possibly for most of the time, to destabilize Westeros, to destabilize the Targaryens, and then later the Baratheons and the Lannisters, so that he can put in his own, basically, like, chosen monarch. Because as we learn in his very last appearance in A Dance with Dragons, he is trying to help Aegon the Sixth, Rhaegar's son. I'm doing all the air quotes because we don't actually know if he's really who he's saying he is. But he says that he is trying to put him on the throne because that kid, who was supposedly smuggled out of King's Landing, has been raised amongst the small folk to empathize with the small folk and will, according to his upbringing, be a good king for all of the people, not just the lords. And this theme of looking out for the small folk, like the common people, is something that Varys hints at several times throughout the series. Particularly in his last scene with Ned Stark, he convinces Ned to basically lie and say that, oh, he made up all the stuff about Joffrey so that it basically doesn't turn into this all-out war at that point. And he convinces Ned to do it, again, because he's saying, like, if you don't, this is going to cause war, lots of people are going to die. So there you go, Varys is just like this altruistic guy, yes? But it's not 100% clear because there are like gaps in the logic here. Because we do know that he has been trying to manipulate and start a war, from the very beginning. Arya overhears a conversation between Varys and Illyrio down in the Silvery area. I don't remember where. People have told me before. I never remember. But she overhears this conversation where I think Illyrio is asking like Varys to like delay the start of the war, but like again, they are trying to start a war. It's just at what time, when, and where. Now, we can argue that, okay, so they are trying to time a war for the result that they're hoping for, to be able to put their Aegon on the throne, because they think that's going to be good for the small folk overall, and so maybe just, like, the war at the right time is the temporary, like, ouchie before the medicine starts to work, maybe? But it does beg the question, where does this plan originate from, and how has it evolved over the years? Because if he really was, like, the one that was driving Aerys further and further crazy so that he can manipulate some better position for Westeros, first off, why? You're not from there, so what is your angle? And also, what was the intention from the beginning? Because the whole Aegon thing seems like a last-ditch effort towards the end of Robert's Rebellion. So what was the plan before? Were you just trying to replace him with Rhaegar? Would that have been, like, it would have been better than Aerys, but is that what you would be shooting for if your, whole goal is something very benevolent? I don't know. And so I do wonder, like, has this just been like a money-making scheme that eventually turned into, okay, let's try to do the right thing? Because I do think that he kind of gets there eventually, like, fully, because when we get to the very last published chapter of the series, it is the epilogue for Kevin Lannister. Obviously, spoilers if you're still here, it's 9 minutes in. But he kills Kevin Lannister because he's saying Kevin is doing too good of a job restabilizing the kingdom after Cersei's been messing it up, and he needs, like, Cersei back to getting everything all screwy. So he kills Kevin so that isn't a problem anymore. And while he's killing him, he's being very honest. He's explaining exactly what they're going to do. That they're going to put Aegon in, a king who has been like trained to empathize with the small folk, and it's going to be great, but we need the kingdom in chaos first. But if he's telling the truth about that, at that point, why would he also be lying about Aegon if Aegon isn't really a Targaryen? Or does he think he's a Targaryen? And is Varys also like maybe like a Blackfyre? Are they all Blackfyres? Or I don't know. Varys is a mermaid, and it's very confusing, and I'm at 10 minutes, so okay, goodbye.